Our food sovereignty and our food security is under a serious attack. It is so subtle, many people do not see what's happening. Good morning, my people. Again, we're here at Hekima Hub. I'm Mary Kadhomi, the host of Hekima Hub, where we are going to be having conversations that are affecting our society, the African people, the Kenyan people, the Black people really. And our big topic today is matters of food sovereignty and food security, not just in Africa, but in Kenya. Our food sovereignty and our food security is under a serious attack. It is so subtle, many people do not see what's happening, but it's subtle and systematic. There are organizations, there are corporations that are intent on taking over our food sovereignty in Africa. Just for starters, how many countries in Africa that have legalized GMOs? We have 9 countries in Africa. We have South Africa, we have Nigeria, we have Malawi, we have Kenya, we have Ethiopia, we have Swaziland, we have Rwanda. All these are countries that have legalized GMOs in one way or the other. But when you look at how they've legalized GMOs in this country, it is in a subtle way. Most of them have legalized GMO seed production of BT cotton. And the narrative is increasing cotton production in these countries. That's the reason, that's the narrative of why GMOs have been legalized. And then a few of them like Kenya and Ghana and South Africa have legalized the BT maize. Okay? For those countries that have legalized GMOs, first of all, has production of cotton improved? Has the cotton of production improved in these countries? That's a question we need to ask ourselves. Or is this a conduit way of taking over our food sovereignty in Africa? Maybe I will just start by explaining what is food sovereignty. This is the right of a people to define their own food systems, prioritize local food production, and ensure control of land, seed, and resources. What are the factors of production? The basic factors of food production are water, land, seed, and weather. Those are the 4 basic needs you need to be able to produce food. If any of those things are tampered with, then we are losing food sovereignty as a people. When they talk about GMOs, to increase production, increase pest resistance, is that actually the truth of the reasons why they are bringing GMOs in Africa? For the countries like South Africa, where they've been doing GMOs for a long period of time, do we have increased food productions? And what are the other effects that accompany, or effects that have not been discussed that would even affect our bodies? This is a systematic way of taking over our food sovereignty. I will talk about Nigeria, whereby the USAID, the American USAID, has been involved over the years in gaslighting. PR companies have been involved to make sure voices against GMOs are suppressed. Let me talk about my country, Kenya. In Kenya in 2023, the Ruto administration legalized GMOs in a cabinet sitting. They did not follow the stipulation of law, whereby public participation needs to be done. The voices of Kenyans' opinions needs to be listened to if they are okay with legalization of GMOs or not. And when we delve deeper on this aspect of GMOs, for example, in Kenya, we have the Kenya Seed Company. This is government parastatal that is in charge of seed production, hybrid production, seed production, protection in the entire country. But who owns the Kenya Seed Company? The Kenyan government only owns 48% of the Kenya Seed Company. For you to be able to understand who owns the other 52%, you will have to go through layers of corporations, another layer of subsidiaries. It's a bit hard to know who exactly owns what. When we talk about GMO, let me just paint a picture of what GMO is. And I'll use maize as an example. You take a maize seed and introduce another genome. And in this case, they use the bacterial genome. What does this bacteria needs to do? The bacteria is supposed to increase the pest resistance of this particular maize seed. That bacteria, as they say, they make the maize seed drought resistance. Is that even true? But they've not done exclusive studies to even understand the introduction of a foreign genome in the maize seed. What effect will it have on the human body? Because the end consumer of that maize is the human race. They have not filed any science papers explaining what that bacteria in the human body is going to do. Let's talk about ownership. GMOs put biodiversity at risk. Biodiversity is life. Life that was given to us by God, given to us by nature. But now the introduction of GMO, what does it do? It takes away that biodiversity and patenting it to be owned by people. So you're taking a natural occurring seed, you're patenting that very same seed, but you're not telling us who is going to own this seed. What are you doing to the African farmer? You're making the African farmer a perpetual slave to these corporations and subsidiaries of the same. Because anytime a farmer wants to plant maize, they will have to go to the shops and buy. Okay? That alone is a danger. That alone is taking over our food sovereignty. It's taking over seeds that existed in nature and handing those rights to an individual, a subsidiary, or a corporation. Just to paint a picture about Cameroon. The Cameroonian government entirely imports tomatoes from Netherlands and from the EU countries. They've completely driven out the local farmer of tomatoes in Cameroon. Another thing I need to explain to you. Today, as we are speaking, a kilogram of tomato seeds in EU costs 60,000 euros minimum to the highest of 400,000 shillings to buy a GMO seed of tomatoes or hybrid seeds from Europe. In Europe, they no longer have original tomato seedlings or seeds. That was already taken away. I'm trying to paint a picture on what is systematically happening in Africa that is a threat to our food security and our food sovereignty. Once you touch the seed, you touch the land, you touch the weather, you touch the water, you've completely taken over food. And whoever feeds you controls you. When we allow a corporation to come and control our seeds, what are we doing as a people? We are handing over our sovereignty. This is worse than colonization. This is worse than literally being a slave, because these people are going to be controlling our food. Let me talk about our country, Kenya. After this government, actually before this, the Ruto administration legalized GMO, the Uhuru administration had a bill in parliament, and we call it the Seeds and Varieties Act. The Seeds and Varieties Act is a law that was passed in the Uhuru administration that criminalizes sharing of seeds. So today, me as a farmer, if I want to share my seeds with my neighbor, we have a Kenyan law that makes that impossible. And if I do it, I could be fined. I know Kenyans are going to say, oh, you know, they create these laws, but they don't follow them. Remember, they are creating these laws with a purpose, with an intention. What is their intention? As a farmer, in the African society, what did we used to do? We shared seeds. We shared seeds, we shared seedlings. Even we used to exchange bulls, you know, like you take this bull from this village and take it to another village to increase productivity, to improve, you know, the offspring. That's what we did in the African society. So when a government comes in, sponsors a law, and how do they justify those laws? They justify that law by saying that Kenya is a signatory of WTO treaty, you know. So laws that are applying to the countries that are signatories of WTO treaty are supposed to pass these legislations in their country. But what are we doing as an African people? We are giving away our food security and our food sovereignty. And after I know there are lawsuits that are happening right now in the Kenyan courts challenging the Seeds and Varieties Act. But as we are speaking, we have these laws in existence in this country. Come 2023, 2024, what did the Ruto administration do? They've sponsored a ton of bills in agriculture. And these bills are systematically taking over our food sovereignty and our food security. I'm going to discuss a few of these things. We have Water Privatization Bill 2016, but it's an amendment bill that was in Parliament last year. What does this bill say? That a private entity, this could be a person, this could be a corporation or a subsidiary of the same, can come into the country, partner with the government on water supply, on water provision. So let me even bring it home. Let's talk about, say, like Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is one of our freshwater lakes in Kenya. So a company would come, say, from Europe, sign an agreement with the Kenyan government, and get into a partnership of processing the water either for consumption or for agriculture. But when we look at corporations, what is the motivation for anything they do? The motivation is profits. And nowadays, with the attack of health, the motivation is just not profits. The motivation is also control of populations. So when we allow foreign entities or private entities or capitalists to come in and be partners on factors of production, what are we doing as a people? We are trading our food sovereignty and our food security, which is worse than colonization. We had some years back, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation wanted to partner and harvest rivers that are flowing from Mount Kenya, build dams in the areas of the Raka and Ukambani, build dams whereby those dams were going to be supplying water to the people. Those are the private partnerships that they want. But how at risk are we as a people when we get into these things? Our constitution actually stipulates it is the right of every Kenyan to be provided with health, education, water. This is a basic need that the government needs to provide. So if the government has failed to provide water for irrigation, water for consumption to the people, the government should take responsibility, not get into private partnerships. Actually, our constitution protects our food sovereignty. But administrations come and go and they're flouting the constitution left, right, and center. I just talked about one bill, the Water Privatization Bill of 2016. It's an amendment bill. Let me talk about the livestock professional bills. Let me talk about the agriculture professional bills. These are bills that have been sponsored in the Kenyan parliament. And if you ask me, these bills have a connection with legalization of GMOs. These bills have a connection with the Seeds and Varieties Act that was passed before in the Uhuru administration. They are laying a framework, they are laying a structure of taking over food security and food production in this country. Most of these bills that have been sponsored in the Kenyan parliament are requiring farmers to be registered to carry on the trade of farming. The Agriculture Professionals Bill that sits in the Kenyan Parliament even today requires a farmer to be registered. Just like the way a doctor needs to be registered in a medical board, just the same way the architects are registered in the architectural organization, or how lawyers are registered in the LSK to be able to practice. That's the same model. They want to register farmers. And of course, they're establishing a body that registers farmers to carry on the farming activity. So if it's a horticulture farmer, they need to be registered. They pay a small fee to this particular board. and then they can carry on the trade of farming. Guys, this is a trick to take over food production in Kenya. And this is happening in the entire of Africa. We as the African people, we farmed from time immemorial. From the day we even knew we were Africans, we were farmers, we were hunters, we were gatherers. That's what we did. It is a natural phenomenon for an African person to produce food. So the government wants to take this trade and legislate and control. But one thing you must remember, this is not meant for the good of the farmer. They're not enhancing food production. I talked about the Agriculture Professionals Bill. Let me mention about the livestock professional bills. This is affecting the herding communities like Samburu, Borana, Maasai, Turkana, communities that keep livestock. Okay, so even them now, they're supposed to be registered. They are supposed to register their animals with a board that has been established by the Ministry of Agriculture. And this board has given a lot of power to the CS. So the things that we did naturally, the things were our inborn rights, the government wants to take them, regulate them. Regulate how we keep our animals. Regulate how we grow our foods. In the Kenyan parliament now, there sits around 13 bills sitting in parliament as we speak. And what are these bills doing? Systematically taking over food production in this country. Immediately when they legalized GMOs in Kenya, it was a foundation of taking over food production. And then they've introduced bills like the Horticulture Professionals Bill, whereby every single farmer who is involved in the trade of horticulture production, you're planting oranges, you're planting melons, vegetables like sukuma wiki, spinach, dania, all the crops that are 6 months coming down, the horticulture crops. There's a bill that was introduced in parliament by a member of parliament, I'm forgetting her name, Sabina Chege. And what this bill intended to achieve was every farmer register, as an horticulture farmer, register your line of farming. So if you're planting dania, if you're planting oranges, you register that line of production. And you are supposed to be doing soil sampling. So every time you have a crop, you do a soil sample that you take to the ministry. These farmers literally do not even make profits. Agriculture, as we know it, is only meant for food security and food sovereignty of a country. Governments are actually supposed to subsidize agriculture world over, because in today's day and age, with capitalism, it is not profitable to do farming. Farming in itself is, if you're going to do farming to make profits, then you're in for big losses. That's why in Europe, the government big time subsidizes agriculture. They subsidize the inputs, the fertilizers, they subsidize the seeds, they subsidize the chemicals. Because agriculture in its own was not meant to be an income generating activity or a profit making venture. Because in today's day and age, it can't. But instead of African governments subsidizing agriculture, bringing in machinery that makes farming easier, they are now regulating food production. But all these things are happening as a foundation of taking over food production. They want to take away our organic seeds. Once they take away our organic seeds, they've dealt with one factor of production. Once they deal with one factor of production, they are now controlling food production. I have not mentioned about the Dango Bill that was sponsored in the Kenyan parliament. And of course, they have this beautiful way of sanitizing, of legitimizing, or just making it acceptable why we should have a Dango Bill. They had Dango registered, registered for research. The Dango seed is supposed to be researched for improvement. Okay? For any seed to get funding, it has to be registered for research. Once it's registered for research, then it can be developed to be a GMO. That's what they want to do with the Dango seed. Dango is found in Ukambani. one of the biggest exports from Kenya. It's a unique organic seed in Kenya, but they want to channel those seeds to the GMOs. Let's talk about the dangers of GMOs. When they talk about GMO seeds being pest resistant, drought resistance, increased production, they do not talk about the legality of GMO seeds. You know, farming, natural occurring seeds carry a biodiversity ability. The pollens will be surviving in the air for 10 days, and they can be transported by wind to farms 60 kilometers from a particular farm. GMOs can only be done in controlled farms. But how controlled are these farms in Africa? What the GMO seeds will do will tamper with organic farms. It's going to mess organic seeds. And once you tamper with organic seeds, we lose them. Once you lose organic seeds, what do you have? That's an original seed. Once you lose the organic seed, we can only have the GMO seeds that are owned. And once these seeds are owned, where do you get them? You have to get them from the manufacturers, the owners, and you have to pay for it. What are we doing for the African farmer? We are making a farmer a perpetual slave. And not just the farmer. Let's talk about the African population. So the African population is going to be a perpetual slave, a food slavery. And food slavery is worse than real slavery. There's no way they're not going to affect organic farms. So what is the redress of a farmer living in the neighborhood, planting their organic seeds, and pollens from GMO farms that are stuck in the air for 10 days, carried by winds, come to organic farms and do cross-pollination? So this farmer loses their original seeds. That's the organic seeds. What legal redress do we have to help this farmer? There is a systematic campaign happening in Africa. It's happening in Nigeria, in South Africa, in Kenya, in Ghana, in Malawi, in Rwanda, in Swaziland, where the pretext is that the only GMO we've allowed is the BT cotton to increase cotton production. And that's a question. Have we really increased cotton production in these countries? Maybe that should be an analysis. So the legalities, the science questions around these things have not been explained. And specifically, the BT maize has a bacteria introduced to the maize genome. When we look at the number, the amount of chemicals that, say, even the Kenyan farmers are using nowadays, even on the hybrid seeds, these chemicals are already a health hazard in the Kenyan community. Cancers have skyrocketed. Farmers doing potato farming, tomato farming, farmers are excessively using chemicals. I live in a farming area myself. I'm a farmer myself. And from where I come from, you will find farmers growing crops that goes to the market, but they have a small kitchen garden that they plant food to consume. These farmers will never consume the foods that is meant for the market, because they are spraying excessive chemicals in those farms. They will only consume foods from their kitchen garden, and they are not going to use any chemical sprays. So even deep in their consciousness, these farmers know these chemicals are harmful. So if you know these chemicals you're spraying in your farms are harmful, why then do you go ahead and grow a crop, spray excessively, and push it to the market? What are the governments doing to regulate this? You know, in the Meru community, there is an outburst of cancer cases. And the story, even in the media and the narratives, is that all the chemicals that are being used in the potato farms in Nakuru, in Molo, in Nyandarua, those areas are swept in the rivers. Those are the chemicals, those are the rivers where people are going to fetch the water. They're going to consume that water. Our animals are consuming the same water. This is just not unique in the Meru community. Even in the Kalenjin community, in the Rift Valley province, there are serious cases, an outbreak of throat cancers. And it's been in the news. There are science papers out there. These chemicals that are being sprayed in the tea plantations, that are, when it rains, are washed down to the rivers. These are the chemicals that are causing explosion of cancers in this country. And you can imagine we are having these conversations of cancers, of chemicals sprayed in farms that are using hybrid seeds. Imagine what is going to happen when we roll out GMO seeds in this country. The excessive use of chemicals, the impact is going to have on the human race. It is going to be disastrous. And the narrative of this increases maize production, is it actually true? Is it actually true that when we use GMO seeds, we increase maize production? You know, when they throw sentences all over the place, oh, we can't feed our communities, Africans are dying of hunger. Isn't that a narrative for them to roll out an agenda of trying to control our food sovereignty and our food security? In Africa, to be specific, Africa, if everything is done right, can feed the entire continent, the entire world. The entire world. Africa has the best lands for agriculture, the best weather for agriculture. Why would anyone say that we cannot feed ourselves, that our seeds cannot produce enough? Isn't that a message meant for gaslighting so that we can allow GMOs in our population? Food colonization is the worst colonization our people can go through. And I'm doing this conversation to make sure that I'm beaming light in the right places. Most of the policymakers, the people that sit in government offices making decisions, they need to look at these things more. I have not touched on the question of land. Land is a factor of production, one of the biggest factors of production. And you can see what is happening in Africa, more so in Tanzania and Kenya with the carbon credits, where foreigners are taking over expansive pieces of land in the Maasai community, you know, with the guise of carbon credits, you know, where our lands are taken for 40 years. You cannot even do beekeeping. You cannot graze your animals in these lands in the guise of carbon credits. And these farmers have been duped. What are they doing? They're taking over land as a factor of production. This is another aspect of food colonization. When I look at food security and food sovereignty, to me, this is food colonization. It is the worst. You better be dealing with colonization of guns. But when you deal with food colonization, this is a bad place Africans are getting into. And you see, like even in Kenya, the Finance Bill 2024, Finance Bill 2025, where the government is so keen on introducing taxes on land, taxes on idle land. Until when did the government start making decisions on land? Land is a personal possession. We inherit it from our parents. We buy lands. What we do with these lands is up to us. What the government can do is guide, give a framework, give incentives of encouraging people to do farming. These governments are not subsidizing agriculture in any way. More and more people are abandoning agriculture because the taxes are so high. The taxes on seed, the taxes on machinery. So if the governments were keen on improving food production, they would not go for GMOs. They would incentivize farm inputs. They would incentivize, they would create an export market. That would be a guaranteed way of encouraging citizens to invest more in agriculture. So you must look and see that clearly there is a strategy of demoralizing farmers, pushing farmers out of the trade of farming in a subtle way, but still progressively giving those rights to subsidiaries, multinationals, and foreigners. When you look at carbon credits, when you look at the makers of GMO, when you look at these things, there are subtle ways of taking over food production in our country. In Kenya, just to go through, we have Agriculture and Food Authority Bill. To me, I call all these bills, Livestock Bill, Dango Bill or the Man Bean Bill, Agriculture Professionals and Registration and Licensing Bill, Nuts and Oil Crop Development Bill. All these bills essentially are criminalizing agriculture. Criminalizing agriculture. They are making agriculture so, what's the word? They're making agriculture so hard a trade to carry on so that many more people step away from food production. Because we've already talked about it's not a profit-making venture. When you look at the rice bill, in Kenya they've touched all this. the Land Amendment Bill, the Horticulture Crop Authority Bill, all these bills that have come in 2023, 2024, come in Parliament on the foundation of legalization of GMOs, on another foundation of Seeds and Varieties Act, and it's all a system of taking over our food sovereignty and our food security. This is a foundation of food colonization in Africa. Every African needs to speak against it. Governments need to step away from GMOs. It has been proven that the GMO seeds do not guarantee bumper harvest. They do not guarantee pest resistance. The more you keep growing these GMO seeds, the more they become pest resistant. So what happens? As you go on season after season after season, you'll have to keep increasing the chemicals that you're spraying. Why? Because the seeds are becoming more pest resistant. But that, on the other side, you have not put down science papers and explain how these chemicals that are being sprayed on the farms, what effect they're having on the human body. So we are supposed to sit back and observe, explosion of cancers and figure out, where do these cancers come from? We didn't have this number of cancers 20, 30 years ago. What different thing have we done as a people? Have we really improved our food security and food sovereignty? Is production high? How many metric of tons of maize is Africa producing? So these are the kind of conversations government needs to be having, because we are falling straight into the line of food colonization in this country. And even as I wind up this discussion, are we trying to make the African farmer a slave? In Kenya today, and I'm talking about hybrid seeds, 1 kilogram of Neptune onion seeds in Kenya cost 40,000 shillings minus VAT. How many Kenyan farmers are going to afford 40,000 to buy seeds? What is the government doing to subsidize? Nothing. So if the government is literally doing nothing to subsidize, why is the same government doing everything on the other side and looking like they're taking over food production? Yeah. Why excessive taxation on land? Land is such a basic factor of production. Why is the Kenyan government hell-bent on increasing taxation on land, hell-bent on having regulation on idle land, yet they've done nothing on subsidizing for the farmer? It is time for us to take control of our food sovereignty, food security, and invent ways of increasing food production in Africa. Let's have the hard conversations. Let's go back to our ways. Let's protect our seeds. Have we protected our organic seeds? Or our organic seeds are going to get into the levels of extinction? Are we attacking biodiversity as a community? Because once we lose biodiversity, then we lose it all. Is GMO the only way to do this? Why can't we do intercropping? Why can't we do cross-cropping that works to prevent pests? Why can't we practice organic manure? Why don't we no longer have organic manure, which makes sure our soils are alive? We have worms in the soil, we have butterflies, we have chameleons, we have an ecosystem in the soil where flora and fauna relate, because that's the way nature was meant to be. These are hard conversations we should have. And for this and more, on this podcast, Hekima Hub, we are going to talk about issues affecting our health, and food does that, our wellness, what affects us. And big on this is our food security and our food sovereignty. Please watch this video, share, subscribe to our channel. Let's keep having these conversations. And to reach me, my email is on the screen. My number is on the screen. Let's keep building up these conversations for this and more. Thank you so much.